Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for everyone for coming along this morning. My name is Paula Reid, Mayor of Kingborough, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to Council's annual general meeting today on Saturday the 3rd of December 2022. So welcome to everyone who is in the public gallery. We are also streaming this meeting via YouTube, so I'm sure that there are many people who are also watching along at home, so we welcome you also as well. The time being 11:03 a.m, I now officially declare this meeting open. I wish to advise that council meetings are recorded and made publicly available on our website. And in accordance with council's policy, I will ask the General Manager to confirm that the audio recording has started.
Confirm, Mayor.
Thank you. I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this land, pay respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community. Our attendees today are myself, Councillor Reid, Deputy Mayor Councillor Gladright, Councillor Antoli, Councillor Bain, Councillor Cordova and Councillor Fox. From our staff today we have the General Manager, Mr Arnold, the Director of Governance, Recreation and Property Services, Mr Smee, the Director of Environment, Development and Community Services, Dr Fox, our Media and Communications Advisor, Ms Adams, our Communications and Engagement Support Officer, Ms Klein, and our Executive Assistant, Mrs Morton. We have 4 apologies today from councillors: Councillor Dean, Councillor Street, Councillor Richardson and Councillor Midgley. We turn now to page 1, confirmation of minutes. The motion as printed on the screen is that the minutes of the annual general meeting held on the 4th of December 2021 be confirmed as a true record. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved in Councillor Fox and seconded Councillor Gladright. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. I'd like to start by just welcoming everybody here today. I do hope that everyone has had the opportunity to read the annual report that has been produced, because I think it does provide a very comprehensive picture of what is a very wide variety of work that Council undertakes in our community. And many people believe that local government is purely about that catchphrase that you quite often hear, roads, rates and rubbish. But I think the annual report really debunks that myth, and it shows the breadth of the work that Council does. And I'm pretty sure that if we were to do a survey of people in the community, some people wouldn't know that some of the services and the programs that they access are actually being provided by Kingborough Council. I wanted to touch on just a couple of examples of programs that I think have really benefited our community. Our highly successful volunteer program, which just celebrated its 10th birthday, that benefits so many people in our community. And I know that the volunteers get a lot out of it, as well as the clients that they service. The way that our Natural Areas Biodiversity team often partners with other organisations to undertake projects to enhance and protect our environment, I think is a huge credit to Council. And a great example of that in the last year was when we worked together with a local artist on a project called Clay Habitat, and that produced ceramic nesting modules for little penguins. And they've now been installed across the municipality for those penguins to utilise. And that sort of project was wonderful. It involved artists, it involved people in the community being able to purchase one of those nesting habitats and then have it installed in the community. And it was a great learning experience for everyone. I'm very proud of the work that we do to protect our natural wildlife habitat through the introduction of cat prohibited areas and stray cat management, and the report touches on some of the initiatives in that. We also have a wonderful monthly Learning for Life program that enables residents to take part in health, wellbeing, arts and learning opportunities at a subsidised cost. I've always been a passionate supporter of lifelong learning, and this is a way that we can reduce some of the barriers to people in our community perhaps not being able to access some of those courses at full cost. We have continued on in the past year with the very popular Really, Really Free market, and that has a range of benefits, not only bringing the community together, but it gives the residents the chance to give away items that otherwise might go to landfill. And finally, the report highlights the financial assistance and grants that we provide over the course of a year to schools, to community groups and to charities for a really wide range of projects and events. And they benefit significant numbers of the community with those. Some of the grants are only small, but it's incredible how then that contributes to the broader community. They're just a really small snapshot of some of the things that we do. And if you look in the annual report, you'll see all how many roads we rebuilt and how many footpaths we did and all the infrastructure that we provide. But I think sometimes we perhaps take for granted the broad role of council and what we provide. But none of that can be achieved without strong financial management. And thankfully, that is something that the council has continued in the past 12 months. And at the same time as we've been able to do that, I am very proud to say that we continue to be one of the lowest rating urban councils in Tasmania. And that is something that I know that councillors take very, very seriously, especially in the context of the rising cost of living. It's not to say we didn't have some challenges over the past year. Some of them would be familiar to all of you. The unseasonal weather that we've had, particularly the heavy rains, that did create significant additional work for our maintenance crews. And then, of course, that put behind our regular scheduled maintenance. They've been working very, very hard to catch up since then. Like other organisations, like businesses and households, council has been impacted by the rising costs of doing business, and that is going to continue to be a challenge for us, particularly with our capital works program. And so that's something that we need to really consider as we move into the budget program. And of course, COVID has continued to impact all of us, and I think will do into the future. And unfortunately, it has, like any other organisation, it has impacted us with things like staffing shortages when we've had staff off work, which then places pressure on our other staff. Following the recent elections, we now have a new council and we have a number of the new members here with us today. I certainly look forward to us all continuing to work together and working together as a new council for our community, because our strategic plan does have its vision as the community is at the heart of everything we do. And I know, and I said this at the declaration of office when councillors were sworn in, I know that each councillor who is elected to council has that vision and that commitment to our community at their heart. We may not always agree in the way that we want to achieve things, but we can agree that we are here to work for the community. So I look forward to the next 12 months and being able to do that. At times, I'm sure we will disagree, but I think we will collectively ensure that our focus remains very much on how can we help you as a council? How can we make Kingborough a continuing place to live, work and play? So thank you very much for everyone being here today. Thank you to my fellow councillors. I know the ones who were apologies today all had genuine reasons for not being able to be here, and they do very much apologise for their absence, but I'm sure they're listening along at home. So thank you, and we will continue on with the agenda. We now have a presentation by Mr. Smee, our Director of Governance, Recreation and Property Services. I'm sure, and for those members of the Community Forum who were at the meeting this morning, a couple of the questions during the forum will probably be touched on, the answers will be touched on during the presentation that we're having. We're going to look at community infrastructure projects, so community halls and bus shelters and playgrounds and so on. So this is just designed to give you an overview of some of the work that we've been doing in quite a strategic way to ensure that the money that we do spend is being spent appropriately, but also that we're working in a strategic way with the facilities that we own. So over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I am going to touch on 4 areas of community infrastructure this morning: bus stops, public toilets, playgrounds and community halls. Now, bus stops is not actually council's project, although we do have some involvement. The accessible bus stop project is part of the Kingston congestion package that's being delivered under the Hobart City deal, and under that package 2.65 million has been allocated towards improving bus stops throughout Kingborough. The primary objective is to ensure compliance with the Disability Discrimination Act and upgrade bus stops to meet the disability standards for accessible transport. So the process, it's been undertaken by the Department of State Growth, and it's involved identification of bus stops, audit of them, and prioritisation of some 235 bus stops throughout Kingborough. The initial audit has identified 50 bus stops as priority, and that's been using a ranking process of both usage and a weighted index that relates to the various components of a bus stop, particularly in relation to accessibility. There's also been some new stops identified in areas of key growth for Metro. The process to date has involved design work and stakeholder feedback, and the construction program is due to commence mid-2023. So that's just an example of the work that has been done in relation to the development of the concept design. So that's a bus stop at Maranoa Road, and you can see the various considerations that have been taken into account, and that's the same process that's been done on all of the 235 bus stops. So I'll move on to public toilets. In 2017, we developed a public toilet strategy. I think it was well recognised that our existing public toilet infrastructure was not meeting contemporary standards or community expectations, and we would have loved to upgrade them all at once, but our financial position is such that it was necessary to do it in a strategic manner over a period of time. So very similar to the bus stop project, the process involved an audit, a condition assessment and a prioritisation. And one of the key drivers, again similar to the bus stops, was achieving compliant disability access. We also looked at condition, we looked at usage rates, and we looked at environmental impact. So some public toilets that were on an old septic system were causing some environmental harm, so they were also prioritised. Where possible, we've changed our public toilets from gender specific to general neutral, and that remains one of our key drivers in relation to our upgrades. And as I mentioned, there's been a 10-year action plan developed that we're now 5 years into in terms of upgrading or replacing, and we're trying to do at least one per year. So I'll just run through some of the individual ones. Back in 2017, the Bruny Island public toilets was a major concern. We had horror stories of tourists going by the side of the road, and Council's first step to address this was to build a new facility at Alona. So that facility didn't exist. It's a new one, and as you can see, it's a off-the-shelf design that comes in kit form, and these have proved to be one of the most cost-effective means of providing new facilities. They also come, they're fully compliant with all standards. So They're also not only cost effective, but they're efficient and quick to put up, and we don't have to worry about whether they're going to meet standards or not, because all of that has been ticked off. So that's the one at Alonna. We put a new one in at Lunawanna. The one on the top left is the previous one, and the bottom one is the new one. It's that photo was taken towards the end of construction. We refurbished the one at Dens Point. The top was the existing. It's been refurbished internally and externally. That's the internal. I didn't choose the colour scheme. At Kingston Beach, the facility at Kingston Beach was one of our finest. Also our most heavily used and probably in the worst condition. So you'd all be aware that that facility was replaced some 3 or 4 years ago now. Conningham Beach, we have another wonderful facility there, and that's also been replaced with an off-the-shelf design, and the location of that is adjoining the car park, so there's compliant disability access, whereas the previous one was located at the end of the beach, so far less accessible. We did a refurb on the Blackmans Bay facility. Christopher Johnson Park, it might look like a new facility down the bottom, but that is a superimposed image. That facility is under construction at the moment, and the bottom image is what it will look like. Kettering Oval, this is the facilities that are underneath the hall, at the back of the hall. We were initially going to upgrade them, but there was community expressed a view that it would be far better to build a new one, and that is the design of the new one on the bottom, and once again that work has commenced. Taroona Beach, our initial thoughts were to replace this, but the Taroona community expressed a view that the existing facility was very much of importance to them to retain, so we engaged a local architect, and he has been preparing plans to upgrade that facility to once again achieve the disabled access that is currently lacking on the existing one, and a general upgrade and refurbishment of what is a very dated facility. Woodbridge Hall, you can see a set of steps going to the existing ones, completely inaccessible, and we've worked closely with the Woodbridge Hall Committee to develop plans for a new one that will be on the southern side, and once again we'll have level access, and it will also be internally accessible from the hall, which this current one isn't. Margate Hall, similar story. Existing facilities have no accessible toilets, and we're currently working on plans to provide unisex accessible facility in the middle of that, and similarly to Woodbridge, providing internal access from the hall. Longley Reserve, this will be a new facility, much overdue, a facility at the Longley Reserve. Once again, we've finalised the design. It will be a kit form one, and that's the proposed design. That work is also due to take place over the next few months. I should say that the delivery time on these kit form ones has been 6 months, so the funding came in at the beginning of the financial year, but we've had to wait until they have arrived, so that's why some of these have been delayed. Kingston Park, we're building a new public toilet there. That's under construction at the moment. The public toilets at Kingston Park are the ones that are connected to the hub, with the public open space stage 2 about to come online. This toilet will service both the playground and the new public open space. Snug Beach is next on the list, so the rather dated looking facility you see there will be listed as a capital bid for next financial year, and in accordance with our strategy that will be the next one we tackle. I'll move on to community halls. We've got 16 community halls. There's one in each of the main townships. We spend about $200,000 per year cleaning and maintaining them, and they're managed by a mix of hall management committees, which we're extremely grateful for the volunteers that put their hand up to manage a hall on behalf of the community. Some of them are leased, for example the CWA hall on Bruni, and some are directly managed by council. So the Kingston Beach Hall, Blackmans Bay Hall, Margate Hall and Sandfly Hall are all directly managed by council. And as part of the provision of our halls, we provide insurance cover for hirers. So if you're a casual hirer, you don't need to worry about taking out public liability insurance cover, because we have a policy that covers that. So that policy states that the definition of a casual hirer is someone that uses the hall no more than once a week. So it's pretty generous really, because you could hire a hall on 52 occasions per year and be covered by our insurance. Once again, we developed a strategy. We did that in 2020. The process involved a condition assessment by a building surveyor. We did some surveys. We met with the hall management committees. We obtained usage statistics. We looked at the history, and a 5-year capital works plan was prepared for our halls. And I'll just run through some of the work we've done to date. At Adventure Bay, we've done an electrical upgrade and a wastewater system upgrade. Kettering Hall, we've replaced windows, replaced the floor, done some roof repairs, done some significant work to the foundations, and the external toilet upgrade I mentioned a moment ago is currently happening. There's more work to be done on Kettering Hall. Kitchen upgrade, and it very much needs an accessible internal toilet facility. Down on Bruni, the Lunawanna Hall, we have just done some work on the roof, and that's included cladding, new light fixtures and ceilings. The Margate Hall's had a new floor, it's had a new roof, and I mentioned the toilet upgrade. The Middleton Hall, that has had a toilet upgrade in the past 12 months. So did an associated upgrade of the wastewater system. That was struggling to cope, particularly when the Middleton Fair was on. And we've done some access path lighting. Sandfly Hall's been repainted. It's got a new roof. And similar to Kettering, there was some significant foundation work required at Sandfly Hall. Not that you can see it, but that took place. At Snug Hall, we've replaced the roof, and Snug Hall is our next priority in relation to the strategy. It needs a kitchen upgrade. The committee are keen to see a replacement of the heating system and some acoustic upgrades as well. So all of those will be scoped and put in as a capital bid for next financial year. The Taroona Hall, we prepared a master plan for that, and stage 1 has just been completed, and that's been a new deck and external entry doors. And once again, that photo was taken while work wasn't quite complete, but that deck is now complete, as are the entrance doors providing access into the RSL room, and that ramp leads down to the RSL memorial there. Woodbridge Hall, we've replaced the roof. We put insulation in the ceiling. There's been a floor replacement in the kitchen, and I mentioned the toilet upgrade that's currently underway. And I'm now going to move on to playgrounds. Also prepared a strategy in 2020, and that process included, again, audit, categorisation of our playgrounds. So we categorise them into local urban, local suburban, district, sub-regional and regional. and then the prioritisation has been based on assessment against Australian standards and a whole of park approach. So it hasn't just been the play equipment we've looked at. We've looked at things like access paths and shade and trees, etc. The Kingston Park Playground you'll all be familiar with. I don't talk about that too much, but the Public Open Space Stage 2 that I referred to earlier has been a drawn-out process, unfortunately. The contractors went overtime and then they got into the winter weather. However, we are hopeful that this will be open before Christmas. Certainly all the paths and the pump track and the fitness nodes. The grass bit in the middle won't be, but the majority will be open for Christmas. In Wells Parade, we put a new playground in there. Ashton Dennehy Park at Snug Beach. That was done a few years ago. We did an upgrade of the equipment on the Blackmans Bay foreshore. We put in some new equipment at Tinderbox foreshore. Louise Hinsby Park is currently underway. We had hoped to finish that by the end of November, but the play equipment's only just arrived. Once again, hoping to have that completed by Christmas. At Drew Point, the work will commence there. We are hoping late January. And in the design and consultation phase, we have Alamo Park, Donahue Gardens, Willow Bend Park, and the new playground proposed for Spring Farm Estate. And not listed there, but I should also add Silverwater Park in Woodbridge, where we've had to do a redesign because the initial design we came up with following the consultation significantly exceeded our budget. But once again, the Silverwater playground is due to be undertaken early next year. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We appreciate that. And that's just a snapshot of some of the work that has gone on in recent years in some of the facilities that Council owns. We now move to page 2, the 2021-22 annual report. We did invite submissions from the public and they closed on the 30th of November. And the submissions are then listed on pages 3, 4, 5. So we had questions on notice from the public. We had the first one on page 3 was in relation to staffing from Professor Michael Rowan with an officer's response from Angie Everingham. We had a question on page 4 in relation to climate change from Professor Michael Rowan, and there was an officer's response from Liz Quinn. And a question on page 5 in relation to Strelas amendments from Mr H Van Beelen and an officer's response from Adrienne Stander. So staying on page 5, we're now at notices of motion. And so these are the notices of motion that have previously been submitted. We have one from Professor Michael Rowan who submitted a motion headed Personal Bushfire Shelters. So I'm looking for a mover. I'm assuming, thank you, Professor Rowan is moving. Do I have a seconder, please? Second, sorry. Okay, the lady on, thank you. Seconded by Wendy Edwards. Professor Rowan, if you would like to come forward to the microphone, please, and speak to your motion. Oh. Just on the side first of the microphone, the power button and then the talk button. Oh, is it a dud? It's not on. we want to swap? Yeah. It's just important that we use the microphone so that the people at home who are watching it can hear, and also so that we have the recording. Professor Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor. And I must say I was very pleased to follow that presentation on toilets because toilets for bushfire share one vital characteristic.
Sorry, that's gone off again for some reason. Ah. We're not trying to censor you, let me assure you. We want to hear from you. Bear with us. Okay. All right. Ah. Yeah. It's too far away. We can just push the lectern towards us. No. Oh, wow. My apologies. If you're watching at home, we're just having some technical difficulties with the microphone, which is strange because we normally have ones there when we meet as a council. Okay.
Okay, well
Thank you.
Let me begin again. Thank you, Mayor, and let me say again that I'm pleased to follow the presentation on toilets because, as I was saying, they share an important characteristic with fire bunkers, and that is if you need to avail yourself of such a facility, there is no more important facility in the world for you at that very moment. I did a lot of research on fire. I was resident of the Adelaide Hills for over 20 years. I was very fire conscious. And I'm particularly concerned that with climate change, we are moving into an era of fire which none of us have actually experienced. We have a local expert in the university, Professor David Bowman, and he points out that fires are now creating their own weather. They're called pyrocumulonimbus clouds, which create conditions in which aerial firefighting is impossible, and ground crews can simply retreat and try and save what structures they can. This is the future which Kingborough faces as one of the most fire-prone districts in Australia and certainly in Tasmania. Many people in Kingston and Kingborough have responded to that by installing fire bunkers. I've heard of many anecdotal reports, including in a lecture by Professor Bowman in relation to people installing fire bunkers. We know that from the Royal Commission in Victoria into the 2009 fires, fire bunkers save lives, but only if they're properly constructed. There were 173 people died in the 2009 fires, which occasioned that very important and useful Royal Commission, and I hope all councillors have had an opportunity to read the Royal Commission report given Kingston's fire-prone status, but if not, please do so. Of those 173 people, 113 died in their home or in a structure which they thought would keep them safe from fire, including cellars in their home. But others were saved by access to a fire bunker which was properly constructed. As a consequence of the Royal Commission and their recommendations, they made two in relation to fire bunkers, and the first was that a fire bunker can form part of a sound Plan B if it's impossible to evacuate your home when the fire comes upon you. And given CSIRO research on the 2019 fires, which showed fires spotting 35 kilometres ahead of the main fire front, for any of us living in Kingborough, we could find it impossible to leave our properties when the fire we thought was only yet on the backside of the mountain. So the CSIRO did research on the matter, and they proposed standards for bushfire bunkers, which were then incorporated in the National Construction Code. And there is one fire bunker which has been accredited in Victoria, which has won 2 national awards from Resilience Australia, and in the 2019 fires was saved the lives of at least 3 householders who took to the bunker when it was impossible to evacuate, having been overrun by fire. The CSIRO reported 6 instances where people took to that structure, that bunker, the same one that we've installed, and in 3 cases when they emerged, their house had been totally destroyed. So if they had not had the bunker available to them, they would have been added to the fatalities from that 2019 tragedy. I think, therefore, that the council must accept that since there's been no clear process and currently no capacity for people to gain approval for a bushfire bunker in Tasmania, and yet a clear need for people to install such bunkers, an evidence-based need, particularly in Kingborough, we are in the situation that Victoria was in prior to the 2009 bushfires, where bushfire bunkers are proceeding to be installed, both accredited in other jurisdictions and home constructed and designed, in an unregulated and unsafe manner. And that is a matter which requires leadership by the council in order to address. I would hope, given the information that's in the Victorian Bushfires Royal Commission and the research by the CSIRO, that council would see that there is good evidence that bushfire bunkers can form part of a safe plan, and no evidence, I repeat that, zero, zilch, nix, no evidence whatsoever that bushfire bunkers properly designed and constructed and installed constitute a threat to the safety of people who might need to take to them. Therefore, I would hope that council would want to encourage the installation of accredited fire bunkers in the municipality, and would be looking to see what needs to be done to enable that to happen. And it appears to me that the council could simply say, for the purposes of installing a fire bunker in Kingborough, if that bunker has been accredited in another Australian jurisdiction, then that's good enough for us. The fact of the matter is, whether a bunker meets the requirements of the National Construction Code or not is a matter of physics. The laws of physics are invariant in relation to travel across Bass Strait. If a fire bunker works in Victoria, it works in Tasmania, full stop. Should council... Time?
So you can ask for the meeting to grant you an extension of time by 2 minutes if you wish, but I should have sort of indicated at the start that as we're bound by the local government meeting procedures regulations, each speaker gets a maximum of 5 minutes. So we've got a mover in, I was about to say Councillor Grace, David Grace, and seconded by Tricia Ramsey, that Professor Rowan be granted an additional 2 minutes. All those in favour? Okay. Against? Oh, look at that. You've got them in the palm of your hand, Professor Rowan.
I think I should go back to lecturing. Now, I understand in life that we can't always do what we believe is right. We can't always do what we want to do. It may be that the council, sincerely, having read the research, concludes that fire bunkers would be a most desirable addition to the bushfire readiness plans of residents of Kingborough. And it may be, therefore, that the council moves to say that the accreditation of a bushfire bunker in another Australian jurisdiction will meet the requirements for approval in Kingborough, and yet there is a legal obstacle to so doing. If that be the case, council should get legal advice that specifies very clearly exactly what that obstacle is and what legislative changes are required to overcome it. And then council should show leadership in the community, not only in Kingborough, but more widely in Tasmania, to ensure that those legislative changes are carried through in order, quite simply, the fact of the matter, that lives be saved when the next bushfire of the order of 1967 or worse does occur. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further speakers on the motion? If not, I will put the motion. It's as displayed on the screen. I won't read through it because it's quite lengthy. It's also printed in the agendas that you have before you. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? So could I have just a show of hands so we can just get a count, please? 1, 2. So is anyone not vote? Oh, there's a few abstentions. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 23 votes for, and there were none against. Anyone against? A number of abstentions. The motion is carried. We move now to the second motion that had been provided prior to the meeting, and it is the Kingborough Ratepayers Association Incorporated have submitted a notice of motion headed Continuous Improvement Policy. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for the motion. I have a mover in Ray Westwood and a seconder in Tricia Ramsey. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, briefly, Mayor. I'm speaking on behalf of the Kingborough Ratepayers Association, and I will read the motion as it is quite brief. That Council consider adoption of a continuous improvement policy to facilitate advances in the quality of administrative processes, service delivery and accountability systems, reduce costs and waste, simplify work processes and improve employee and customer satisfaction. Mayor, this motion is not intended to be critical of the Council. We know, all of us know, that Council has been judged as being one of the most efficient councils in Tasmania. Am I correct in that?
One of the most what, sorry?
Efficient?
Oh.
Efficiently run?
We'll take it, right?
You'll take it? Yeah. So, when I worked in government, Mayor, we used to have motivational workshops. We had trendy words such as paradigm shifts, community engagement. These things went on for hours and hours and achieved very little. We do not want that. If you have a look at the motion, it is fairly broad in that what it requires is that Council adopt a continuous policy of improvement. Now that means that they should have a program to do so. They haven't got it at the present time, although we recognise that there are policies in Council at the present time. The risk management policy contains some elements of that, and also the complaints management policy also contains elements of it. So there has been a trend in recent years, as we all know, for Council to take on responsibilities that are ever increasing. And some of these are a crossover, in our opinion, between state policy and federal policy. And you can see the expanding evidence of this, and if it continues in the way that it is proposed, and we believe it will be proposed in the future of local government review, that this is a problem, it's going to be a problem for Council, because you have to have the resources to do it, you have to have the funding to do it, and where does all of this come from? Now, as a Ratepayers Association, we are wary that these sort of things are going to be foisted on Council, and that to the detriment of your budget. So, what does it mean as regards continuous improvement? What it really means is that things get better, that you continuously look at your programs, you try and find out what is required to improve and put those things into effect. Now, those sort of things would be contained in the policies, and it should be adequately worded to not be overboard, not to go too far, but to just have credence to that sort of proposal. And that's what we are putting up. Just to finish off, I noticed that our General Manager has the same surname as our soccer coach, who is playing tomorrow morning. Never forget what that man said. He said, every one of you, every day, has to do something to improve.
Very good quote. Thank you, Mr. Westwood. Are there any further speakers to the motion? If not, I will put the motion, moved by Ray Westwood, seconded by Tricia Ramsey. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Okay, I'm going to do a count. And do you want to count as well? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I don't know how to, it's hard to count like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, I got 20. 20? Yep. Any against? 1 against. Thank you. The motion is carried. We now move to public questions without notice and motions from the floor. Oh, no, they weren't. They're coming up here. Yep, sorry. We now move to questions without notice and motions from the floor. I'm going to start with questions without notice first, and then we'll take any motions from the floor following that. Just a reminder, we have circulated the meeting procedures. If you are asking a question, if you could come forward to the lectern and please state your name and the suburb that you live in. We'd like it if the questions were as concise as possible so we can get through as many as possible. Please be mindful of some of the meeting procedures about not making any personal reflections on any councillors, council employees or other members of the public. Please don't use any offensive language. And we will get through as many questions as, well, we'll get through all of them. So, questions without notice. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. And David Grace.
Thank you very much. And I'd also welcome the new councillors and wish you luck in your next 4-year journey. My question is relating to the urban growth in our municipality. In particular, the question raised by Mr. Van Beelen and a response from council relating to the Greater Hobart compliance as part of a 30-year Greater Hobart plan. I said around the table, and I'll say it again, I'm very disappointed that this council has taken this attitude with the Greater Hobart restricting growth in the area, Margate Snug, in particular, as I quoted several times around this table, from Kingston South. It is no more than a moratorium. And this council said we would never ever put another moratorium on any particular area of our municipality. We went through that years ago and it cost us dearly. Mayor, I understand it's not entirely council, it is state government too. You yourself, Mayor, and I congratulate you on is your vision is for more housing, affordability housing for our community. Well, Mayor, I ask you to look at that again because in a sense you can't do that, only in Kingston. So are we going to be told by this council where we can live and where we can't live? I'm going to work through this because I've had so many people come to me since I've retired. I've got a clear head. I can think about things now and I'm going to take this on. And if we have to rally the state government, that we will do. My only other question is... Can I answer that question first before you move to another one?
Look, I certainly take on board what you've said about the urban growth strategy. It was designed predominantly to look at the supply and demand situation and the need for significant growth to occur within the urban boundaries so that there is adequate proximity to transport and other infrastructure. But that doesn't exclude other areas being developed in the future. And I know that Council's strategic planner, Mr. Stander, has been doing significant work with the state government to try and include areas such as Margate in the process. There has been a little bit of movement from the state government in that regard, and we're continuing to engage with them to try and encourage that. So it is certainly a work in progress.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I look forward to working hand in hand with you on this then. As it comes to my other question, I understand in today's paper we're losing our planner a strategic planner, Mr.
No, that was an environmental planner position that was advertised.
Oh, great.
It's not Mr. Stander.
No, because he's, you're quite right, and I
Dr.
don't
Fox
wanna-
looked very alarmed right then. She's been off on sick leave, so she was...
I don't want to single any employee out because, as you know, I respect all our employees, but he's done a lot of work, as you have said.
Yes.
Just one quick other question I have to raise again. Again this week, ambulances. 89-year-old fell in a home, and the government is trying to keep people in their own homes to save money. This lady laid on the floor for 4 hours, then waited 2 to 3 hours before an ambulance could assist her. Mayor, this is not good enough in this democratic world we're living in. And here the government are talking about building a stadium and so forth. For God's sake, can the government get their priorities right, work with the bloody councils and find the needs that we need in our municipalities? Thank you. Do you want me to come back and...
Thank you. I keep going to call you Councillor Grace, so old habits die hard. But thank you for that question, because I know there was a question in there somewhere. Old habits do die hard, but I'm aware that you've raised this before, and certainly we have been putting pressure on the state government to provide a ambulance station in the Channel that is staffed, but also that we believe there should be a joint emergency services hub in Kingborough that combines police, ambulance, fire brigade and state emergency service, because the significant growth that we're having in this area certainly warrants it, and the facilities at the moment are not fit for purpose, particularly for the fire brigade or ambulance, and the police station is bursting at the seams. So this is a big problem, not just in Kingborough but statewide. I've already started discussions with the state government about that and will continue. As for the response time for ambulances, I find that appalling, and I think we all hope that we don't ever have to call an ambulance, but when you do need one, you expect that it's going to come in a timely manner. So I share your sentiments about, as passionate as I am about getting an AFL team for Tasmania, I share your sentiments about the football stadium and the fact that with our health system, as broken as it is, that we don't need to be spending $750 million on a stadium when we need ambulances that are fully funded and fully staffed that can arrive in a timely way.
Yeah, just quickly, I just want to say I am not criticising the staff of those ambulances.
Oh, no, I know. Yep.
First class.
Yep.
And we have an ambulance station in Kingston, but our ambulance could be in North.
That's correct.
But
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any further questions from members of the public? Thank you, Mr. Punch.
I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Woonawina people. I also acknowledge that today is International Day for Disability. I want to move a motion. Cement production is the world's single biggest industrial cause of carbon pollution. And I want to move in relation to last year's AGM meeting that the cement jungle, which is growing in the Kingston Central and the old school site, is added as an offset in the Kingborough Council's global warming strategy.
We'll just wait until Mrs. Morton has got that on the screen. Could you just repeat part of that for her?
Yeah. I move... did you get... oh, I don't need to...
We just need the specific wording of the motion to be...
I move that the concrete jungle that is growing in the Kingston Central on the old school site is added as an offset to the Kingborough Council's global warming strategy.
Let's wait until we've just got those. We'll just clarify, we'll just make sure
sorry,
when
yeah.
Mrs. Morton's finished
Yep.
that we've got the exact wording for you.
Yep.
So the wording that is on the screen,
Yeah, that's fine.
you're happy with that?
Yep.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Brian Doran. Thank you. If you'd like to speak to the motion, thanks, Mr. Punch.
Yes. Just very briefly, I was surprised. I've raised this with a number of councillors, and I've had a very negative response, and I'm surprised at that because I've stated the scientific evidence that cement production is the world's single biggest industrial cause of carbon pollution. Cement production is the world's single biggest industrial cause of carbon pollution, and it's responsible for 8% of the global emission. And that's a scientific fact, and if you want to check it, well, I invite you to do so. Brian and I live on 75 acres of land on the Old Huon Road, and again it's this contest between that happens in the municipality between the rural areas and the urban areas, and the amount of money and developments going on in the urban areas. The development of the old school site is not in line with the numerous consultations that have gone on for that piece of land right from the time that the government moved to, and the mayor probably remembers it, to move the school site at great expense. We have 75 acres of land, and that is dedicated to land for wildlife, and it's a major resource to this municipality. It's a carbon sink which is extraordinary, and it's a benefit to the flora and fauna. It's between Kingston Central and the Huon, and it's a real pathway for the fauna, and we have to keep it free from the weeds, and it's a protection for the fauna, the indigenous fauna, and we take that really seriously, and we're really committed to it. And the land for wildlife is a major resource in this municipality, and we should be allowed to be concerned about what's happening in Hobart Central. It's also a social reality. It's renowned, and there is considerable research that the use of concrete is really not a good social building material, and that is also researched. So I'm happy to move that motion, and
Thank you very much. Are there any further speakers? Thank you. Would you like to come to the lectern? Oh, I've got one up the back here. No, that's right. Oh, thank you. If you could just start by stating your name and...
Keith Pardo. I'm on the Committee for the Safety and Transport.
And your
Kingston
suburb, please.
Kingston.
Thank you.
Kingston Beach has new timber surrounds for the trees. At the committee meeting, I asked if it's been checked by the insurance if they are safe.
Sorry. I'd called for speakers on this motion. We haven't dealt with the motion yet. Sorry, beg your pardon. We'll come back to you, Mr. Pardo. Are there any further speakers on the motion? If not, I'm going to put the motion. It's as printed on the screen for the information of people who are watching at home. It is that the concrete jungle at the old Kingston High School site is added as an offset to the Kingborough Council's global warming strategy. I'll need a show of hands, please, for all those in favour. 1, 2, 3. Put your hands up really high, please, because it's very difficult to see people in the back otherwise. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I get 14. What's everyone else counting, please? I get 14. Keep your hands up. 14. 14. Thank you. Those against? Nobody against. Okay. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. Okay, we're returning to questions or motions. Mr. Pardo. Thank you.
At the Kingston Beach, they put new surrounds around the trees. These surrounds now are 8 inches further towards the footpath. They have very sharp corners. This pathway is usually used by seniors or older people going on exercise during the day and parents with their children. Now, if you get a child or an old person hit that corner, they're going to be really badly damaged because it's very sharp. I was told the corners were going to be taken off. They haven't the last time I looked, but they are 8 inches further, so that means the path cannot be widened like the one down the other end, and it's the most used path. You've got paths all around the community council areas, but that one, which is used every day, all day, is ignored. Someone is going to get hurt with those things, and I hope your insurance company will be able to cope for that.
Thank you. I was down there myself the other day and noticed it. I don't know if we have an update. I've just come back from leave. Mr. Arnold, can you help?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Pardo, I don't have an update, but I will give you an undertaking that I will follow up with the Works Manager on Monday, because my understanding was exactly the same as yours, that those sharp edges were to be taken off. So we will post on our website when that's anticipated to occur, and we'll post when it's completed.
I did bring it up 4 months ago at the committee meeting when the very first one was installed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pardo. We'll definitely follow that up and get back to you. Any further motions or questions? Sorry, I've got Sajini and then Robert. Sajini.
Hope you can see me.
We can. Thank you, Sajini.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Sajini Sumar. I'm a chairperson of Multicultural Women's Council of Tasmania and as well as community volunteer for 25 years. I respectfully move that the Kingborough Council initiate a consultation to establish a voice with rapidly growing number of multicultural communities and people in Kingborough.
So we'll just get the... so can you just repeat that for Mrs. Morton? Yep.
Do you want me to repeat?
Yes, please.
I respectfully move that the Kingborough Council initiate a consultation to establish a voice with the rapidly growing number of multicultural...
Hang on, wait, slow down.
Okay.
Voice.
A voice with rapidly growing number of multicultural communities and people in Kingborough.
Hang on.
Read again?
No, just... Yep. Is there more after that, or is that correct? So I've got council initiate a consultation to establish a voice with the rapidly growing number of multicultural communities and people in Kingborough.
Yes,
is that the motion?
Yes,
I'm looking
please.
for a seconder for the motion, please. Seconded by David Grace. Thank you. If you'd like to speak to the motion.
Well, you can look around here. We have a lot of multicultural communities. We call it CAL communities.
Make sure, sorry, Sajini, just make sure so that people at home can hear you. Thank you.
We call it CAL communities. That means culturally and linguistically diverse background. There are a lot of people living here. They love to be in Kingborough, not anywhere else. And I myself live here 30 years. I don't want to live anywhere around. I traveled around the world, many countries I lived and worked. But this is the best place I can call home. So we do promote it and we need them here. As I speak now, Australia government is recruiting over 2,500 people from India. So desperately we need them here in all level of many areas, including farming, medicine, you name. Now when you look at the inclusion in our communities, it is not enough. I would say, a sort of violation of human rights, not including certain groups of people, and it's not deliberately done. There are many reasons happened in the past, including our Aboriginal people here. We know the history, but when we came here, we also facing similar stuff. I'm not here to say anything negative. I have a lot of positive thing, and we love to live here. I like to make that change. Look, since many mayors were here in this council, since I live here 30 years, I met many mayors in the past, but none of them made any changes. I'm so sorry to say that. Since Paula, sorry, can you call mayor, came here, she listening to us. So I'm so glad. Thank you for that, this opportunity. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Sajini. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Mr. Punch.
I want to commend Sajini for her motion, and I want to add a quality to it in terms of the voice. We're all now challenged in Australia with the understanding of the voice, and I think Council needs to understand the nature of consultation with minority groups or specific diversity groups, and that it can't be with any representative group. And it challenges the composition of the council, it challenges the composition of the staff of the council, and if you need to look at anything, look at the state government's management of workplace diversity, which is heads of department have to report on to the state government every year, and it's a really high quality nature of consultation. And so I really commend Sajini for her wording, and particularly that we appreciate the understanding of the nature of that consultation in terms of the voice from the people that are concerned. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any further speakers to the motion? Please come forward. No? No further speakers to the motion? If not, I'll put the motion. It's moved by Sajini Sumar, seconded by David Grace, that Council initiate a consultation to establish a voice with the rapidly growing number of multicultural communities and people in Kingborough. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. We get 19. 19. Anyone against the motion? The motion is carried. Any further questions? Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I was doing Robert first because he'd indicated previously, I beg your pardon, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I refer back to Mr. Punch's motion a little while ago with reference to the gradually decreasing tree cover and canopy cover ratio for the municipality as development comes apace. My question is, does the council plan on developing an urban canopy recovery policy or strategy similar to the lines that have been adopted by the Adelaide City Council and the Melbourne City Council, as was reported recently? What might their response be to the gradual decreasing of urban canopy cover?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Crossthwaite. We have funding in the current financial year to start the development of a street tree strategy, and that would look at canopy coverage, what we can do to plant more street trees throughout the municipality. Hobart City Council have got a very extensive street tree policy. Theirs does come at a significant cost, a recurrent cost of over $1 million a year. Obviously, that's not the sort of recurrent funding that we have available to us, but the council, during our budget deliberations for the current financial year, we're very keen to see a much greener Kingborough in terms of the level of trees, not just in the CBD but throughout. Some of the newer subdivisions, you know, we've got a range of initiatives in there, like some small areas of street trees and so on that have proved in some cases to be successful, in others not, where residents have taken it upon themselves to remove them, which isn't very helpful to further greening those new subdivisions. But certainly it's something that we are very keen to progress. I don't believe the work has started on it as yet, but it certainly will be in before the end of the financial year.
Thanks, if I might comment, Mayor. It's refreshing to hear that this is becoming part of the thinking about how development processes are working. And I think the corollary question might be, would the council consider incorporating tree cover as a significant part of the development application process?
I'm not sure whether we would be allowed to do that. I'll take some advice from the General Manager.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr Crosswaiter, I don't believe that that's currently a consideration under the planning scheme, but I will check that out and get back to you.
So if we can take that part of your question on notice, that would be appreciated. We have the gentleman here next, and then I'll take further questions or notices of motion from the floor.
My name is Henk van Beelen, and I'd like to just talk for a moment on item 9.3 on the agenda, please. Here I've asked a question, and the officer responsible has replied, but it is not going anywhere. There are hardly any building blocks left in the Kingborough municipality, and if that this document says.
Sorry, could you put the microphone slightly closer? Thank you.
Yeah, this document says basically the response from the officer basically says, well, in the fullness of time, when when all regulations have been met and this and that, then it may happen. Well, I think it might be too late. There's so many people looking for building blocks, and there must be a way to overcome this problem of dealing with regulations that, in a case of almost an emergency in the provision of building blocks. It doesn't matter to me personally. My son will deal with it later on, but so I'm not concerned about it. But I think there are so many people living in caravans and even tents in various places. You only have to go to Mountain River to find them, and it is not appropriate for a country like Tasmania, island like Tasmania, that we have such a big shortage of building blocks. I'm encouraging council to look for ways and means to overcoming it, because the fly in the ointment is really the Tasmanian Planning Commission, who rules the roost in this, and who decides what can be extended and where. But there must be a way through the minister to overcome that problem, and I encourage the council to take up the contact with the minister to see what can be done to overcome this particular problem.
Thank you. I will take that as a question as to, can we please write to the Minister for Planning to try and expedite the expansion of the urban growth boundary?
Yes. Okay,
just so that Mrs. Morton can have an action item for the minutes. So certainly we can undertake to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's not a motion, no. I'll just take it as a question which an action has come out of. So thank you very much. Got a further question, gentleman there in the back?
Mayor, councillors, Charles Biggins, Leslie Vale. I don't know if I'm allowed 2 motions.
We'll start with one. You're allowed several.
Okay, well, they both relate to the biodiversity offset. So I'll read the motion first. In the interest of good governance and to avoid conflicts of interest, I move the following motion in 3 parts. That Kingborough Council cease operating the Environmental Fund as an extension of everyday council activities.
So, sorry, just slow down so Mrs. Morton can follow along with you. Yep.
Yeah.
Cease operating the Environmental
Give her a copy
Fund.
afterwards. That as an extension of everyday council activities and instead direct payments.
Hang on, stop. Yep. And instead, yep.
Direct payments to an independent, not-for-profit trust fund able to fulfil the role of administrator for the biodiversity offset funds.
Hang on, stop. Role of administrator. For the, just added the before biodiversity. For, no, the administrator for the
biodiversity offset funds.
Yep.
Part B, that Kingborough Council incorporate a free market biodiversity offset credit scheme, or they already have a biodiversity offset policy, that they incorporate the use of offset credits into the
can we just clarify that?
I'll just read that from the beginning there.
Yep.
That Kingborough Council incorporate a free market biodiversity offset credits into the biodiversity offset policy.
Yep.
Allowing landowners to create and sell biodiversity offset credits on the open market through an independent and authorised...
Wait on. It's on the open market, yep.
Through an independent and authorised biodiversity offset broker, should they wish to do so. Part C, that Kingborough Council commission an independent auditor's report on the governance, administration, brokerage and financial expenditure.
Wait on, stop. On the governance, administration, brokerage and...
Financial expenditure relating to the Kingborough environmental offsets, biodiversity offsets and the Kingborough Environmental Fund to date. So that's the motions. I'll just speak to the motion.
Just wait, just hold on 2 secs. We've just got to finish the motion and then we need a seconder. So if you could just hold for a moment. Can we just have the last couple of words? So we've got brokerage and financial expenditure relating to the Kingborough environmental offsets, biodiversity offsets.
And the Kingborough Environmental Fund to date.
Environmental Fund to date. So I'm going to just read the motion to make sure that we have it correct. It's in 3 parts. Parts A, B and C. A is that Kingborough Council cease operating the Environmental Fund as an extension of everyday council activities and instead direct payments to an independent not-for-profit trust fund able to fulfil the role of administrator for the biodiversity offset funds. B, that Kingborough Council incorporate a free market biodiversity offset credits into the biodiversity offset policy, allowing landowners to create and sell biodiversity offset credits on the open market through an independent and authorised biodiversity offset broker, should they wish to do so. And C, that Kingborough Council commission an independent auditor's report on the governance, administration, brokerage and financial expenditure relating to the Kingborough environmental offsets, biodiversity offsets and the Kingborough Environmental Fund to date. Is that correct?
Correct. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just put A, B and C in it, please, Mrs Morton. So do I have a seconder? So it's moved by Mr Biggins. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Tricia Ramsey. Mr Biggins, if you'd like to speak to the motion.
Okay. Kingborough's Environmental Fund has received over $1 million in environmental offset payments since 2004, and more recently from the Kingborough's Biodiversity Offset Policy. Interstate biodiversity offset schemes are a product of state or federal government environmental departments. However, neither Kingborough's environmental offset scheme or its biodiversity offset policy have been endorsed by the state or federal government environment ministries. Kingborough Council is the sole author of its biodiversity offset policy, the sole authority to administer the offset policy, the sole auditor of the offset policy, the sole offset broker of the policy, and the sole fund manager receiving payments for the biodiversity offset policy. That's all I've got to say about that.
Thank you.
Motion?
Thank you. I'll put the motion. I won't read it again. I think we're all, because it's quite lengthy. So it is moved by Mr Biggins, seconded by Ms Ramsey. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Yes, sorry, beg your pardon. Mr Crossway.
Thank you, Mayor. As I see what Mr Biggins is proposing here is it's a proposal to find somebody outside council or some bodies outside council, presumably at great expense, which would presumably an expense which would diminish the effectiveness of the fund, when we have a council who is quite capable of performing all of these functions in their own right. Madam Mayor, to me this is a job for Mr Biggins and a few of his mates. Let's not be kidded by it.
Are there any further speakers on the motion? Mr Biggins, would you like a right of reply to sum up?
Sure. As I stated at the beginning, in the interest of good governance and to avoid conflicts of interest, I move the following motions in three parts. Yes, it's a separation of powers. As council, as the planning authority, on one hand, is also issuing a biodiversity offset policy, which is not part of planning. It's its own internal policy, and yet the two are being presented at the same time. Pay the offset and we'll give you the planning approval. So yes, you're involving third parties, but we are an expanding municipality. Offsets, of course, are going to be, they operate in every other state. Of course, they're going to operate here. You've already collected $1 million. The scrutiny that's going to come upon the council down the track over these kind of issues, yeah, it's about transparency and it's about separation of powers. That's all I've got to say about that.
Thank you. The debate is now closed. I'm going to put the motion as printed on the screen, moved by Mr Biggins, seconded by Ms Ramsey. All those in favour, please raise your hands. 11. All those against, please raise your hands. 6. 11 to 6, the motion is carried. Do I have any further notices of motion or questions? Mr Biggins.
I have one other motion. Okay, so this also relates to the biodiversity policy. The motion is in two parts. That Kingborough Council exempt landowners from incurring a biodiversity offset debt
Hang on, slow down.
That Kingborough Council exempt landowners from incurring a biodiversity offset debt when establishing fire breaks and fire trails that comply with a bushfire mitigation plan prepared by a TFS accredited fire plan practitioner.
Fire plan practitioner, yep.
Now,
Yes.
Part B, that Kingborough Council record a biodiversity credit against each private property that is equal to the proven expenses.
Slow down.
The Kingborough Council record a biodiversity credit against each private property that is equal to the proven expenses incurred by a landowner maintaining fire breaks, fire trails, and the annual cost of mitigating their bushfire risk.
Yes. Is that the two parts, A and B?
That's the two parts.
Okay, do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded. That's the entire motion, so it's got an A and a B. We'll get those in there in a moment. So it's seconded by Ms. Ramsey. If you would like to speak to the motion.
Sure. Biodiversity offset schemes are a form of environmental accounting, and as in all accounting systems, both the assets and liabilities need to be accounted for. Kingborough's biodiversity offset policy thoroughly documents the environmental asset value of the municipality. The nominated land conservation zone area alone has an estimated biodiversity replacement value of over $1 billion. Will I say that slowly? $1 billion? The biodiversity offset policy only records environmental assets when the vegetation is either being removed or when it is being preserved for perpetuity, and it doesn't account for biodiversity liabilities. Landowners start with a zero balance sheet and go into debt every time that vegetation is removed, even when the landowner is mitigating bushfire risk that's helping to protect the remaining environmental asset from a high-intensity bushfire. To make this a true environmental accounting system, we must recognise the liabilities that come with hosting a biodiverse landscape on private property and not financially burden landowners for acting responsibly. In light of the high value of the environmental asset currently hosted on private land and the shared community responsibility of protecting that asset from a high-intensity bushfire, I move the following motion.
Thank you. Are there further speakers on the motion, for or against? Mr. Punch.
I speak strongly against this motion, and it will be challenged even if it's approved. Council has a strong responsibility in establishing the standards for fire abatement. This council is notorious for not stating those standards. It only has standards in relation to urban areas at the moment, and it has no compliance procedures at the moment that are respected. In the rural areas, we are highly at risk of danger in relation to the council's lack of statement of standards and also in relation to its lack of compliance. We can't negotiate compliance as individual people. People that are absent from their land are notoriously non-active in relation to fire abatement, and there are also people that are quite angrily against compliance standards. And for us to try and negotiate that outside of council's responsibility is highly, highly dangerous.
Thank you very much. Are there any further speakers? If not, Mr. Biggins, would you like to sum up?
My reply, yes, I'm fully aware of council's abatement scheme. I asked questions regarding it at the last council meeting. I will add that to add some background to and some information to the costs that landowners are up for under the new Kingborough's new biodiversity offset policy, which includes habitat. So we're not just talking about trees anymore. We're talking about scrub and bush, and so all the areas that have been nominated for land conservation zone will fall into moderate to high conservation habitat value, valued in excess of, so if vegetation is removed, there is an asset value to it, and then a replacement value, which is 3 times the asset value. So we're looking at $40,000 per hectare to remove understory scrub from your bush block. Whether or not you've been abated by the council to do so, so you get abated by the council to remove that fire hazard, which is also a biodiversity asset. So you're forking out $40,000 a hectare to the council for a biodiversity offset, and then you're forking out for the contractor that the council has sent in there to do the job. This is double dipping, and it's, if people can't have them, if ratepayers and landowners haven't been able to maintain the countryside, the landscape, to a level where we are not facing a high intensity fire. Yes, we know we're a fire-prone area, but the data on what the actual intensity of the likely fire that this countryside will run, is being kept from us, shared between the TFS, the State Fire Management Committee, and the council. Yeah, blind Freddie. It can't be proven. Have a look outside. Been here for 30 years. The bush hasn't got any thinner in that time. It's off the show. Council needs to not be in the way, not be standing in the way between a landowner's responsibility and a bushfire. You're putting yourself in the way and saying, oh, well, we're going to double dip here. You're up for the cost of mitigating this stuff because we're going to get serious about bushfire. And, here, by the way, here's a bill for the biodiversity loss. And by the way, thanks for looking after all that biodiversity for us, because, we're busy creating a concrete jungle. That's all I've got to say about that.
Thank you, Mr. Biggins. I'll now put the motion. It is as printed on the screen. It was moved by Mr. Biggins and seconded by Ms. Ramsey. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Mr. Biggins, you might want to vote on your own motion. 1, 2, 3. You don't have to, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I get 12. 12. And those against the motion, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5. 5 against. The motion is carried. Are there any further questions or motions that anybody would like to submit to us? If not, that if there's no further business, we've come to the end. Can I just say to everybody who has come along today, particularly on this beautiful 26-degree day, that you've given up your morning to be here. I appreciate everyone coming along and for the manner in which the meeting was conducted. I know that you probably had other things that you wanted to do on a Saturday, but it is wonderful to see people who are so passionate about the community that we all live in, that you take the time to be here, and also to those people who no doubt are watching along online at home, or maybe from the beach, wherever they might be. As I mentioned earlier, I would encourage you to read the annual report that you're taking away with you. It is also available on our website. The process now going forward for the questions on notice that we've taken, we will obviously provide a response that will come in the minutes for this meeting. In relation to the notices of motion that have passed today, they will then come along to council. Unfortunately, they won't make the agenda for this Monday's meeting, so they will be on the agenda hopefully for the following meeting, which is on Monday the 19th of December. And the process for that is that council staff will provide some advice in relation to each of the motions that have been carried today, and then councillors will make a decision weighing up that advice. I'd like to just very briefly thank the staff who have contributed to today, and also, of course, for all the work that they do throughout the year, but particularly preparing the annual report, getting it out, and running an AGM comes at a sort of an additional workload. So thank you to all the staff here, in particular to Mrs. Morton, who has so we can all see how fast she types, but she has the difficult job of following along, so we appreciate all of that. So thank you very much. I will be declaring the meeting closed, and enjoy the rest of your day.